St. Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 28, I'd like to begin reading in verse 1. The Bible said, "Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. The guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. But the angel answered and said to the women, 'Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And indeed he is going before you into Galilee, and there you will see him. Behold, I have told you.' So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples word." I want to preach for a little while this morning on good news from the graveyard. Good news from the graveyard. You see, as we look at the life of Jesus, we find that it was one of good news continually. From the very beginning of its good news seemed to flow from him to every downtrodden creature that he came across. The angels appeared to the shepherds and said in Luke chapter 2 verse 10, said, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy will be to all people." In talking about Jesus' ministry, the Bible said in Luke chapter 8 and verse 1, he said, he went throughout every city and village and preaching and showing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God. Then Jesus exalted and said this even about himself in Luke chapter 4 when he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captive and the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." You see, Jesus had good news for those who were unaccustomed to hearing the good news. You see, he had good news for the poor, as the Bible talked about when John sent two of his disciples to Jesus asking him, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" But Jesus answered and said to them, "Go tell John the things that you've seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the gospel preached." He said, "Go tell John what's been going on around here. Tell him his search is over. Tell him he's looking no further, that this is what God is doing in the earth." You see, he had good news for those that was sick, according to Matthew 4 and 23, when Jesus went about Galilee teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of diseases among the people. He had good news for the sinner, according to John 3 and 16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Oh, he had good news for Martha and Mary when their brother Lazarus had died. In John chapter 11 verse 25, as they ran to him and crying about their brother, this is his words. He said, "Believe upon me, because I am the resurrection and the life, and he that believes on me, and though he was dead, he shall live again." He is the bearer of good news. You see, in Luke chapter 8 28 and verse 50, we find here that he had good news for Jairus. When his daughter had become ill and had died, then he came to the Lord. And there was a servant that met him there also after he was talking to the Lord and telling him the condition of his daughter. But when the Lord heard what the servant was saying, the servant came by saying, don't bother the master any longer. Don't tell him anything else. It's all over. It's done. Your daughter's dead. Don't take up any more of his time. Oh, but I like what Jesus said. He said, don't be afraid. Only believe.